I'd like to begin by acknowledging the First Nations people of the lands in which we have gathered, the traditional custodians, and to acknowledge our gratitude that we share this land today, our sorrow for the costs of that sharing, and our hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together. It is our custom to begin our webinars with the YCW prayer, and so I will now ask you to join with me in prayer. Lord Jesus, a worker like me, help me and all my fellow workers to think like you, to work with you, to pray through you, to live in you, to give to you all my strength and all my time. May your kingdom come in all our factories, workshops, and offices, and in all our homes. Be everywhere better known, better loved, better served. Deliver us forever from injustice and hatred, from evil and sin. May our souls remain in your grace today, and may the soul of every worker who died on Labour's battlefield rest in peace. Amen.
Thanks very much, Pat. Thanks, Pat. All right, well, it falls to me the privilege of introducing Bishop Peter Cullinane, Emeritus Bishop of Palmerston North in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I won't tell you what year Bishop Peter was born, but I'll say he's equally as experienced as our famous Pope Francis. So thanks very much for joining us, Bishop Peter. And you do have a vast lifetime of experience before you, which I think began with your studies in Rome, doing a licentiate at Angelicum, which you completed in 1964, followed by a master's in theology in Otago, and then so many years of service in parish life and in diocesan life. You became bishop in 1980, the first bishop of Palmerston North. And during that experience, you also served as president of the New Zealand Catholic Bishops' Conference and also on the International Committee for the English in the Liturgy, which I'm sure was a particularly interesting experience. Not quite on our topic for today, but I'm sure people would be interested to hear something about that possibly as well. But today, specifically, our topic is on the mission of lay people. And as the Australian Cardinal Institute, it's a field in which we have a particular interest, given our Cardinal tradition. So we're really pleased to welcome Bishop Peter to be with us today. Thanks very much for being with us, and over to you.
Thank you, Stefan, and greetings to everybody. Kia ora koutou katoa. So Stefan has asked me to share some thoughts with you on the mission and the vocation of lay people. I'd be sure that you're all familiar with what Pope Benedict said about the need for a change of mindset. If we are to promote the responsibility of everybody in the church, he said there needs to be a change of mindset. So I propose we reflect a little bit on what that means. Change of mindset from what? It's a change of mindset to what? And why is it necessary? And when we look at the reasons why this change is needed, I think we also see that it's too soon to say that the need has already been met. It's a work in progress. So let's look at what he actually said on that occasion in 2009. He based his claim on the teachings of the Council, and it was already 40 years after the Council. And this is the quote I'm referring to. He said, it's necessary to improve pastoral structures in such a way that co-responsibility of all members of the people of God is gradually promoted. This demands a change of mindset, particularly concerning lay people. They must no longer be viewed as collaborators of the clergy, but truly recognized as co-responsible for the church's being and action. In other words, for how the church shaped up and what it does. The mindset which saw lay people mainly as collaborators of the clergy was and is clericalism. And it's as much a mindset of lay people as it is of the clergy. And to see how that mindset, clericalist mindset, impacts the role of lay people, it's enough to look at some of the pious errors that derived from that mindset. I'll name some of them. For example, when it said that what the church is like and what it does is really the responsibility of the ordained, that lay involvement is a matter of helping them with what's their responsibility. Again, when it's said that holiness of life is more for priests and religious than it is for lay people, or when it's said that ordained persons participate more fully in the Eucharist than do the laity, or when it's said that particular callings within the church bring about a higher status than we already have from baptism, or that lay involvement normally requires some kind of mandate or permission, or that the need for lay involvement comes from the shortage of priests. So now all those errors derive from a way of thinking and from a model of church that's based on holy orders. And that's precisely what the Second Vatican Council intended to turn around. You will remember that there was high drama at the council when the text presented to the bishops describing the church was based on holy orders. And the eventual constitution on the church, Lumen Gentium, presents a model of church that's rooted in baptism. Now, this takes nothing away from holy orders. It doesn't make holy orders the main basis for our understanding of the church. Baptism is where our personal call to holiness comes from. Baptism is where our calling to mission comes from, both for laity and ordained. Benedict said that co-responsibility of lay and ordained was both for the church's being and its actions. So let's look at each of these in turn. Many of us grew up in a church that was experienced as controlling, paternalistic, clericalist, conformist. That's changing, due mainly to the ways that greater respect for persons and the primacy of conscience lead to different ways of exercising responsibility, leadership, and different expectations as to how leadership should be exercised. It's not surprising that when responsibility for the church was considered to be the responsibility of the ordained, then laity had little experience of speaking up, speaking back. It wasn't always so. In earlier centuries, laity were involved in works of administration and management, roles in the liturgy, the election of bishops, choice of ministers, and so on. And the diminishment of this involvement is a relatively recent phenomenon. I read somewhere that the First Vatican Council, in the middle of the 19th century, was the first one to which no lay people were invited. When the Diocese of Palmerston North was established in 1980, we started with a diocesan pastoral council, but after a little while, we parked that in favour of establishing 5 regional deanery pastoral forums. These deanery pastoral forums gave scope for a wider range of participants and a wider range of topics. I used to meet with those regions, each one of them 3 times a year, and we postponed any consideration of a diocesan synod until after the people had more experience of speaking up on issues. Happens we never ever got to having a diocesan synod. We ran out of time. But if we're co-responsible for the church's mission, then our pastoral planning needed to be done together, and our formation needed to be received from and with one another. We changed the traditional clergy days to pastoral days with the laity. I'll give you some further examples of why it's too soon to say that the change of mindset has already happened. In this diocese, when we didn't have enough priests for every parish, we did not resort immediately to amalgamating parishes, except where this was desirable for other reasons. There's too much to lose when parishioners find that they're part of what was a different parish. They feel more responsibility for their apostolates, ministries, their formation programs, their RCIA, etc., when it's part of their own parish life. I think they lose something of that sense of responsibility for those things when they lose their parish identity. So instead of amalgamations, we made use of Canon 517, Part 2, which allowed us to appoint suitable laypersons to manage the parish, the priest coming in for sacramental ministries, etc. More recently, this has been reversed with the amalgamation of many of our parishes. I don't think this is so much any kind of pushback. I think it does indicate that the need for a change of mindset is still unfinished. An obvious area of unfinished change of mindset surrounds the continued use of the 1962 Pope John Paul II granted this for specific pastoral needs. But he also lamented that some have, and I quote, not even tried to understand the reasons for changes, preferring a more passive, silent way of being present. Quote, happy the father to say the Mass while they say their own prayers. The idea that laity attend Mass while a priest celebrates Mass disenfranchises the congregation, because the official teaching of the Church is that it's the whole congregation that celebrates Eucharist. I recommend, by the way, an article by the Australian theologian Gerard Moore that appeared in the October issue of the Australian Catholic Record last year, in which he talks about the difference between ceremony, which we go to see, and ritual, we participate in. It's a very fine article. I recommend it to people's attention. So one last example of how the unfinished change of mindset, lay involvement, derives from a misunderstanding around ordination. In 1971, the International Theological Commission warned against the danger of priests forming, quote, a separate caste. The underlying problem was a pious exaggeration in how ordination was to be spoken of in some literature, some preaching, presumably. This led Pope John Paul II in 1988 to remind us that, and I quote, what we become through ordination in the realm of function, not of dignity, not of holiness. It's one's relationship with the community that changes. So what I've said so far is that all those varieties of an incomplete mindset have the potential to diminish lay co-responsibility. So let's switch now to looking at lay involvement in the mission of the Church. I'll simply offer you 7 points and then we'll open it up for discussion. First of all, the sense of being personally called. It's called into existence by God for a purpose which only that person can fulfill. And wherever we play our part, it's God who is working in us. Pope Paul, when he says Philippians, God begetting in us any measure of desire or achievement. So spirituality is not a matter of making room for God in our life. We are being drawn by God into God's life. God is the main actor. We cooperate. Second point, a good starting point for understanding mission is something that Pope John Paul II said in at least 2, if not 3, of his encyclical letters. He said, man is the route the Church must take. Now that translates as making life more authentically human is the route the Church must take. It's all part of our being drawn into God's life. But if that's God's agenda, then how can it not be the church's agenda? The place and the time where that actually happens is in all the ordinary circumstances of life. And that's the reason why the laity are the front line of the church's mission. Note, I didn't say that they are in the church's front line. They are the church's front line. Third point, because this is an incarnation spirituality, it requires that our participation in civil society's own forums and agencies and organizations, in political activities, where we need to be present as leaven in the dough. Fourthly, the council taught that the formation of young people, the aim of it is to, and again, here I quote, become actively involved in various community organizations, open to discuss with others, and willing to do their best to promote the common good. That's in the Declaration on Vocation. Fifthly, because life is more complex, the apostolate, for all of us, requires our upskilling, the ability to analyze causes, the ability to identify where we can be most effective, and always respecting the proper autonomy of sciences. Sixthly, you're all obviously very familiar with those forms of the lay apostolate, such as Catholic Action, YCW, YCS, Catholic Worker Movement, Catholic Women's League, and so on, which originated before the Council, when the predominant model of church was based on holy orders. In that context, it was easy to think of them as participations in the mission of the Power. And perhaps that's why some of them slipped into the background, but when baptism was the basis of each person's calling and each person's mission, requiring no mandate. The great strength of those forms of the lay apostolate is two important beliefs. Apostolates based on Cardine's method, see, judge, and act, formed strong relationships. Members pray together, study scripture together, analyze together, discern together, plan together, and that made for mutual support and effectiveness. It gave them a way of living in two worlds, the world as it is and the world as it should be. Now, if that's the place where you are, that has huge potential for making a difference. So these forms of apostolate that originated before the Council are too important to lose sight of, but they need to be reset in an ecclesiology based on baptism. Finally, if human life and human authenticity are the route the church must take, then there's a special need, it seems to me, to target areas of life and society that are dehumanizing. I'll refer to two general terms: culture. By that I mean the mental environment within which people form their values, their views, and their customs. What they give their time to, what they look to for entertainment, what pressures there are on family life, what pressures diminish their ability to think for themselves instead of becoming just along. What influences contribute to the dumbing down and the lowering of people's expectations. And then, of course, in that context, the theology of individualism. In its more extreme forms, it amounts to things like truth is whatever the individual believes it is. Morally right is whatever the individual freely chooses. And confusion over what judging means and what it doesn't mean. So what I'm saying is that fallacies of any kind that pervade culture underlie problems at other levels. For example, when we come to the final point, commercial life, industrial life, political life, and care for the environment. I realize that there's debate around the maxim, the business of business is. But for Milton Friedman, it meant the success of the business was the only proper concern of those running it. Any harmful consequences, social consequences, environmental consequences, to be the responsibility of others, like governments, welfare, charities, mental health facilities, kind of division of responsibilities, if you like. Well, there are businesses that do exercise wider responsibility. I think we all know that. And the position of Catholic social teaching is that we do have some responsibility for the consequences of our actions and for just relationships all around. In recent times, Catholic social teaching has gone up a notch thanks to the influence of Pope Benedict. Aiming for justice in relationships is not enough. Relationships need to include a place for, as he said, gratuitous giving, compassion, and forgiving. That's based on the gospel teaching that our love for others needs to be modelled on God's love for us. So what are the characteristics of God's love for us? It is unowed, it's unconditional, it's undeserved, it's forgiving. And it doesn't take too much imagination to realize when these characteristics are carried over into the world of business, that can help to preempt some of the inequalities and the inequities that otherwise be addressed. So, by way of opening it up now to general comments and questions, I'd like to finish with the Maori proverb. Te aha te mea nui o te ao. What is the greatest thing in the world? Te tangata, te tangata, te tangata. People, people, people. If we apply that to what I've been talking about, then when the business of business is business, people become fodder, the planet becomes fodder. But when the business of business is people, then both people and the planet, that is the route that. So, it's your call. Stefan, it's over to you, whatever happens next. But I meant to say it's an honour to be associated with you all. I don't know all the answers, but I'll face anything.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bishop Peter. Yes, wonderful to hear that presentation. And I think there'll be a number of points that would touch a number of us here today, this morning or afternoon, wherever we are in the world, or night. Yeah, one in particular that I don't know if you'd like to comment, just to kind of start off. Yes, you mentioned that prior to Vatican II, for example, Catholic action was articulated as participation in the Apostle of the Hierarchy by Pius XI, and then collaboration by Pius XII, and cooperation by John the 23rd. But as you said, I think it's a very important point. Since Vatican II, and as articulated by Pope Benedict and Pope Francis, it's co-responsibility now. So I think that's to me that's one of the big things that struck me from your talk, and certainly a takeaway that I will bring with me. I don't know, is there anybody else in the chat? Maybe Tony, you can see if there's somebody in the chat already. But anyway, maybe Bishop Peter, you might like to comment on anything.
Well, can I just give a few guidelines for the chat? We've got 47 people, so we can't see all the faces. If you want to ask the question, just pop something in the chat, and I'll keep an eye there. And so, yeah, Bishop Peter, do you want to respond to what Stefan just said? And then I'll follow that with another comment. Thank you.
No, but I agree with Stefan. I think that Pope Benedict's teaching that we've got to change our mindset from thinking about lay people as cooperating with the hierarchy or participating in the hierarchy's responsibilities. they themselves are already co-responsible for how the church shapes up and what it does. It does require a change of mindset, and it's unfinished. And because it's unfinished, it impacts negatively on the ability of lay people to participate.
Okay, thank you for that, Bishop Peter. A couple of practical questions. Some people had trouble with the audio, but be assured the session has been recorded and will be available online. Bishop Peter, are you happy? People are asking, are you happy to make a transcript of your presentation available as well?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. That'd be great. What I was wondering, you made mention of the article by Gerard Moore, and as you said, it's in Australian Catholic Record. One of the difficulties that people in parishes and lay people have is accessing quality research on this sort of issue. We have two people in the group who have identified themselves as doing studies in the role of laity at ACU. And we have a few people in the group who I know have academic connections. Bishop Peter, that issue, how do people in the pews get access to the solid research that's often only available through either expensive subscriptions to the periodicals or access to theological libraries that are not often open to members of the public? And is that one of the bugbears in this whole conversation about the role of laity?
Only there may well be in the group people who have better suggestions in answer to that question than I have. I acknowledge the problem, and I would want to affirm strongly that ongoing formation in the meaning of liturgy as intended by the renewal, that has to be paramount in the ongoing life of the church. And sadly, it's not happening to the extent that it needs to happen, or that it used to happen.
Okay, there's a comment here from Joe. I picked up on the movement back from parishes led by lay people under Canon 517, and that tension between the increase in overseas priests and orders into parishes. Are our bishops and clergy getting... So this is about the tension between the commitment to lay people's leadership in parishes versus the experience of overseas clergy, particularly coming in, and the formation that is needed in that area. Would you like to comment on?
I'm mindful, Tony, of the way in which the traditional missionary orders spared no effort to learn the local cultures and to enculturate themselves in the fields where they would be working among the people. For the Columban Society of St. Columbus, they enculturate. We've got to be, on the one hand, grateful to accept the ministry of those who come to us from offshore, and genuinely grateful to them. They make big sacrifices, many of them, but they also have a responsibility to inculcate in the local church which they've come to.
Thank you, Bishop Peter. I wonder if I can be cheeky. Jinx and John did identify that they are studying this field at ACU. Would either of you like to comment from your studies at this stage, or even what's inspired you to take on your study of the role of laity? Jens, would you like to, you've just put your screen back on, would you like to make a comment? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone, and very nice to see this much interest in evangelization, in spreading the message about our Lord in this world. What prompted me a bit of a testimony, to share Jesus and to study more about this evangelization theology and the role of non-clergy people in the church is the need for it. Like we can see the vocations into priesthood and ordained lives are on the decline. However, in the communities we live, in the society we live, the need for God, the need for gospel is going up, whether they articulate it or not. People need Jesus, people need God, people need connection with something that they do not get in their everyday life. And with all the media backlashing and all those things happening, clergy, when we say people do not like church, if you read through the lines, it is that people do not like clergy. And it is one of the weapons Satan has used so successfully against the church. He undermined the credibility of the clergy. People do not like to listen to clergy, even if they know that it is the truth. But lay people do not have those luggage or baggage with them. They can reach places the clergy cannot reach. And it is high time for us to get up and learn a few tricks and get to people sharing Jesus, not to win arguments, but to win souls.
Bishop Peter, would you like to make a response?
I like that very much. That, Jesus is not an add-on to the church. He is, the new creation, and we're nothing unless we're in union with him. So I like that very much. With regard to the lay people carrying out their apostolate in all the ways they can and need to, your last speaker was absolutely right. They have skills and they don't have the baggage that many of us have. They can penetrate the world and society in ways that can only enhance the reign of God in human life. There may be others who can comment on that better than I can.
Well, while people are getting their thoughts together, Stefan's just thrown in a question. Peter, could you comment on the experience of placing lay people in charge of as parish administrators, etc.? Because this is potentially a big issue in Australia. The pros and cons, and it's a cultural shift about that administrative leadership in the parish taken on by lay people. Have you got some comments, pros and cons on that?
I do. I think we have to learn to trust lay people.
Yes.
Okay, they also need appropriate formation. It would not be fair to put them in charge of a parish without the appropriate formation. We have to trust them to be able to do that, but also for the reason that I mentioned when I said against the idea of amalgamating parishes in order to have a priest in charge of every one. That's a dead end. It's not going to be like that in the future. We certainly need our priests. I don't diminish the significance of ordained ministry, but it's not going to be able to carry on the way we have coming out of several centuries of Christendom. The church is going to be a forum for the greater participation of everybody according to their talents, their opportunities.
Well, the other thing that I often find is the language. The reality is, apart from, say, a forum like this, we don't often hear the word laity and lay people. And has it, in fact, got a bit of has it inherited through clericalism a bit of a cultural cringe? Is it a word that we need to reclaim? Is laity a word we need to reclaim and re-honour in our ecclesiastical language?
Yeah, and one very good reason for that is because otherwise we're left with a negative like non-ordained.
Exactly.
I want to acknowledge one of the notes that's just come up. Yes, Wellington, the Archdiocese of Wellington, has done a great job in the formation of lay people for parish ministry. They tended from the beginning under Cardinal Tom Williams to focus on good formation for the few who were going to be the leaders. We did it a bit differently in Palmerston North. We did it with a wider base, try to reach as many people as possible. And there were some hundreds that were involved in the programs we ran. But you then have to look around to see which ones are going to be acceptable to lay people as well as to priests.
I want to congratulate you, Peter. You're reading the comments as fast as I am. It's great to have a presenter. Let's keep things up. And let's, for yourself, and look around us, we all belong to the Vatican II generation. Those that are coming after us really are coming out of quite a different experience. One of it is there's a neglect of history. There's an ignorance of history. And there's also, I think it's fair to say, many of us caught the spirit of Vatican II and something happened. I remember as an altar boy, I served Tridentine Mass. By the time I was a teenager, I was doing the readings at my local parish. There was a huge cultural shift. This isn't the experience of the people, say, even 40 years and younger. So, Peter, a bit of a response to that cultural shift in the generations. Do you think there's some new skills or some new language or a new way that we need to be looking at?
I think the difference is intergenerational. Those of us who really got excited about the council had experienced the church that was paternalistic and conformist in ways that we grew up under. And the Second Vatican Council gave us a fresh start, pushed back against that type of Christendom. Now, the people of the generations that have come since then, they haven't had to get back so much, to some extent, but not to the same extent. What they're pushing back is the fear that we're losing it, that we're giving into secular values, or that we're losing our sense of the transcendence. That's why they are wanting to claim that the church should be very clear markers, and perhaps that accounts, though, to some extent, for the way in which they push back in terms of uniform and all that kind of gear.
Well, look, lots of male voices, but I wonder if Catherine, you made a little comment there about the terminology. Would you like to put your microphone on and just share that with people?
Mute. Here I am.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Here we are. I just think that the term laity or lay people has got such a lot of baggage with it. It would be better to, rather than enhance that word and use it more often and give it better up-to-date meaning, I think we should drop it altogether and think of a better term and I'm suggesting our term might be professional Catholics, as baptized people, priest, prophet, shepherd, king, all of that. I think for lay people, we need to find a term, and the best one I can think of is that describes people who, as Bishop Peter said, is not a negative. It needs to be a positive one. So I'm just dropping that one into the conversation.
Catherine, I think you've opened a hornet's nest, because in my archdiocese, professional Catholics are highly paid business executives who get to meet with the Archbishop at exclusive places like the Tattersalls Club that I could not afford membership of. It's loaded for me. I'd love to hear other people. And I think that's a great point, Catherine. Would others like to join this conversation? Martin Fleming, would you like to come on and speak to your point?
I'd just like to simply say that as a parish priest, for over 40 years, I tell people my authority is to simply call people together into the body of Christ at the Eucharist. That's where my authority starts, and we sort of work it all out together. I'm not in charge of everything. You might get people ask questions and ask permissions, and I throw it back at them and say, well, what do you think? It's your place, it's not mine, you know. I'm only a traveller here.
Thanks, Martin. David Maloney, would you like to respond?
Well, I was just something that that was said previously by gents about the role of the laity reaching places that priests couldn't, which is what Cardon and Pope Pius XI said, of course. But I'm doing a bit of research on this, around this subject too, and I found a 1912 report in the Melbourne Herald from a New Zealand Marist who said that the want of the age was for a lay apostolate, men who could reach souls whom the priest could not, in every sphere of action, in their warehouses, shops, in their daily lives, in the streets, in the homes, in the hall, in the press, in everyday departments of public life. Laymen could help render the lives of their fellows bright, happy and good, etc. So there you go. I thought that was very early and interesting statement of a need that we've known now for over 100 years, and yet the present young priests seem to be very aware of and proud of their separateness as clergy, and their, I don't know if it's superiority, but I really don't know. I shouldn't have said that. But yeah, any response to that?
Thanks, David. Ray, you put your hand up to make a comment. Scrolling across the screen. Ray, are you still with us? Ray put his hand up. If not, I might go to Margaret. Your comment about naming our role.
Well, yes, it is an interesting discussion on the term laity, which is well, I've grown up with it as a very distinctive term, as subservient, I suppose, to church. But if we could go back to being disciples of Jesus, like Jinx was saying before, you know, we're losing the message if we concentrate on the Catholic Church. We need to concentrate on Jesus and our Heavenly Father, and our need to be in fellowship with God. So if we're going to evangelize, and I don't know how we're going to do that, because looking around the audience today, we're all elderly. Well, not all elderly, but a lot of us are. How do we get through to the next generation of Catholics? So I think we have to be up there and out there as disciples of Jesus. There's no easy road. It's going to be a tough road to bring people back to the love of Christ.
Thanks, Margaret. Ray, you're on screen now. You had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I hope my internet connection works.
It works, yes.
We have been talking about Catholics. I ended up doing a bunch of research and study because I married an Anglican. And I find that within Canada, the data indicates that there are more marriages between a Catholic and a Christian of another tradition than there are between two Catholics. In Australia, 35% of all marriages involving a Catholic are a Catholic with a person of another Christian tradition. I think we need to stop looking at this as a Catholic capital C issue and begin looking at it as a Catholic small c issue, and also beginning to ask if all these people who are part of our community and our church did in fact have something to offer us on their history, their language usage, and so on, that might be of benefit to us in answering these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Bishop Peter, any response to this conversation that's happening?
Yes, I like the reference to let's all become known as disciples of Jesus. Somehow or other, that relationship with him has to take over from some of the terms that were used for differentiation. It's just that hopefully we're all disciples of Jesus, that it's not just the ordained and the lay people. I mean, it's got to be both. Yeah.
We're starting to get quite a good conversation happening there in the chat. Bishop Peter, have you been able to have a look, Jinx, through a comment in? Catherine gave us the official, did a search. We've got the official definition there. And Stefan also raised that point, the ecumenical, and that's another dimension that we can learn from. Bishop Peter, in your experience, the learnings about our role from our other sister churches who have different models of leadership, etc., in their communities. Has that been part of your experience? Has that been something that's been tried in some of your dioceses?
Well, perhaps it's relevant to point out that comment from the International Theological Commission that I mentioned, which warned against priests becoming a separate caste, I don't see that happening so much in the other Christian.
Could I jump in there, Tony? Oh, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Yeah, I just want to pick up on that issue of ecumenism in life, because I think a lot of, especially for people like kind of me who spend our time studying kind of theology and church things, so we kind of tend to see ecumenism as a theological kind of book issue, whereas actually, as that experience from Ray just mentioned, the real ecumenism is with people living it in their own families. And I sometimes feel actually, like this is it's a real area for some work to be done, because like, how do we help people? Like, I know it's kind of a tendency when you live in a sort of multi-religious, multi-faith sort of environment, you kind of tend not to talk about it because you don't want to get into arguments sort of thing. But how do we help people in those circumstances where this is their everyday life? I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe there's some experiences out there on that point. But my sort of feeling about it is, like, not my personal feeling, but sense of what's happening is that we usually kind of let people alone, and we don't really kind of we don't have an organized way of helping people with that ecumenism in their family life. Anyway,
thank you, Stefan. We might go to Cecily, who has also raised that question about, well, Cecily, do you want to speak to your comment? Because I think you raised a really interesting point about our role as lay people. Thank you, Cecily.
Yeah, sure. Kia ora, everybody. I'm from Wellington in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I have been, and others have mentioned too, we grew up with Vatican II, and there was a huge excitement after the council about the idea of the church throwing open its windows and looking at what was happening outside and letting the fresh air in. And we seem to have lost this excitement. And I would suggest that partly it's because the church sees itself as being apart from the world. And I suspect that if we actually saw ourselves as having a mission in the world, not necessarily teaching the world how to be, but you know, actually being in the world and responding to what's going on. And there's a huge amount going on locally, nationally, and internationally. And I think, you know, we in one of the parishes that I was in about 20 years ago, we had a very active social justice group, and it was a lower socioeconomic area, and we perceived that people were struggling to buy vegetables. And so we set up in our parish hall once a fortnight a market for vegetables, and people would come. It worked very well for quite a long time, but it also gave the church a chance to kind of engage with the people in the community. They weren't necessarily churchgoers, but they were definitely responding to a need. And so and that was, it felt really Vatican II-ish, you know, very vibrant and worked really well. And then the powers that be closed it down, and I don't know what happened after that, but you know, I mean, we became more churchy again, and I just thought that was a shame. But you know, I've probably said enough. You've all probably got the idea now.
Thank you so much, Cecily. We've got a few other hands. Peter, we might hear a few more comments, then invite you to respond. John, would you like to join the conversation?
Thanks, Tony. Thanks to Bishop and everyone's sharing, very inspiring. And to respond, Tony's suggestion, how did I come to Australia and to learn about this lay ministry and formation? I have been ordained over 16 years. I worked in a parish and in a seminary, and also in the catechetical center for a few years before coming to Australia. And I have worked with a lot of lay people, and I found their enthusiasm to do the ministry in the church. So that's very inspiring. And I have had a lot of cooperation with them. And one thing I found very important is to get them well trained, especially in China. Our faith formation program is very poor. So I think in order to let them to fully participate, and the good formation is very necessary. So that's why I have been focused on the lay ministry and formation since the last few years. And one thing I'd like to also share is about the name, because I'm doing this lay ministry project, and I have been finding a good, more suitable name for the laity. But I found it's very difficult to find. I also read some information from different theologians. They also tried to find a proper name, but they haven't found out. And what insight I recently got is, I think the original meaning for the laity, the original word will be a Greek. The name is the people, and this is the focus for the Vatican II Council, and we all are the people of God. So again and again, the Vatican II Council called all of us the people of God. So this is everyone's original identity. I think, including priests, each one of us. I think in the past we focused on the clergy too much, and we ignored the identity of laity. But I think before I still tried finding a good name, but before find a proper name, I think we have a mindset, as Bishop said, we have a mindset laity is not a negative to the clergy, but more the mindset is to forward to the relationship between the clergy and the laity. The clergy, the core meaning is to service of the people of God. So we have to identify the clergy, not the laity. We have to re-understand the meaning of laity. And I think that's some mindset we need to focus. The laity is a good word. It's not a negative. It's people of God. It's very important. So that's something I'm not sure if it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm just watching the time. We aim for about an hour. We've got 3 hands up. Can we make some very brief comments and then allow Bishop Peter to make some final comments? Margaret.
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment on you, Tony. Do you, on that shirt that you're wearing, do you have a cross? Do you have
this is a shirt from the National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Catholic Council here in Australia.
And
yes.
So you are wearing a cross. So when we come to talking about discipleship, how many of us are prepared to wear something on our bodies that says to the world, I belong to the Jesus gang? And then that would invite conversation as to why you belong. So, yes, are we prepared to do that? And if we're not prepared to do that, well, really, we're probably not sincere about what we want to do. I mean, I wear a miraculous medal, and it's amazing how much comment that medal brings. That's number one. Number two, I've moved to an area, a town that has no Catholic church. And so I struggled with the idea, finally decided to join the Christian group here. And I got a most incredible welcome. So I've got a foot in the Catholic church where I go to Mass, like this evening, and go to their ceremonies on Sunday. We had an Easter Sunday celebration on the top of Mount Wombat. You could feel the presence of Jesus. So, and the third thing I'd like to say is this little town has what's called a share shed, and people put a little message on the network, the local network. Today, for instance, there are green tomatoes there if you want to go and get them. So I think we can be far more proactive than we are right now.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Great points. Gents, keep them brief. I'm just watching the time. So some people are probably hungry. Gents, did you have a final comment?
Very briefly, look, we are gathered here to think about the mission of the lay people. And I believe the mission is the mission that God entrusted us in the Great Commission. It is to go proclaim the gospel. And whatever we are thinking about the works of charity, the works of justice, all those things are good, but they are good only because we are doing them because of the love of Jesus Christ. We should not lose our focus on the love of Jesus Christ on the cross when we are busy with doing all those other works. They are good, they are needed, they are absolutely important in this world when we are living as disciples of Jesus, but never forget to witness Jesus. We should tell people that we are doing these things because we are Catholics, because we are Christians, and because the love of Jesus compels us to do. And if anyone has a doubt about our mission in this world, let us reflect on the rite of baptism and the prayers there. It says to witness Jesus in this world, not just to do works of charity.
Good, thank you, gents. And Chris, you get to have the final say from the audience here. Thank you. Christopher, turn your microphone on. There.
Sorry, just getting the switch to go right. Kia ora to my sisters and brothers from Aotearoa. It's good to connect with you. I'm involved. I'll just share my hand. I'm involved in theological education here in Melbourne, and to connect with a couple of questions and comments that have been made, one by you, Tony, in particular. The way for people to be able to connect with good, solid research in our area, and it spans a whole lot of subjects, of course, would be to connect with a college of some kind, a university or a college. And there are so many appropriate and helpful courses and units even that people can enroll in. and that's really my other point, is that I think lay leadership in our parishes really requires as many of us as possible to get ourselves theologically educated and spiritually educated, and to kind of build ourselves up in that way and make us, I guess, more attractive to our own parishes in the way of providing some lay leadership and assistance. And the other disclaimer I've got to make is that Martin's my pastor, so we come from the same place, and very much appreciate him. And thank you so much, Bishop Peter, for your inspiring and stimulating talk.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So we might go to you, Bishop Peter, for some final comments after this conversation that's happened face to face, and the comments that people have generously shared in the comment section. So thank you, Bishop Peter.
Thank you, Tony. And I do appreciate the opportunity of being associated with you all. It just occurs to me that if the term laity carries any connotation of diminishment, that would belong to the era in which it was previously used, the era of clericalism. In that context, it can connote something a little less. And therefore, the more we move with the change of mindset and acknowledge that lay people and ordained are co-responsible for what the church is like, then I think probably the problem will solve itself. Will become more known simply as the people of God.
So thank you. So Stefan, over to you. I think we're getting towards the end of our conversation. Yeah.
All right. Yes. Well, thanks very much, Tony, facilitating, and also especially to you, Bishop Peter. It's been great. Well, you can see by the amount of discussion that's been generated, the appreciation that people have for what you've shared with us. And I think there's just so many points that you've raised and people have raised in this conversation. So I think our next step will be to kind of step back a bit. And once we put this online, people will be able to watch it again, and we'll think more about possibly how we can take up some of these issues in future webinars, because this year we are having a big focus on the role of lay people in the world and the church as part of our ACI contribution to the Second Assembly of the Synod. So once again, greatly appreciated, Bishop Peter. Hope I got the chance to cross the Tasman and visit you over there sometime. And I hope you can come over and join us here as well. Thank you very much to you and to everybody for joining us. All right, that's the official end. Thank you all. And you'll hear from us one way or the other. We'll let you know by email once in our next newsletter, once the video is available. And that's our morning session today. Thanks a lot. Thanks to all.